Welcome back, and thank you for tuning into Midnight Affairs Tales. We appreciate every single one of you. We'd love to know what part of the world you are watching from right now. Let us know in the comments. Now let's dive into today's story, Chapter 1. She called it a mission of mercy. But mercy doesn't come with bloodstains. Alex's voice was low, almost a whisper as he stared at the ledger. The numbers blurred, his breath caught in his throat. $1 million payment to Farouk, humanitarian logistics. A name he knew too well. A name that stank of blood and dust and the screaming ghosts of his past. He shut the ledger hard enough to rattle the empty whiskey glass beside him. His reflection in the window was a ghost, haunted eyes, square shoulders that had carried rifles and bodies alike. He thought he'd buried that part of himself. Thought Julia's work was a final redemption for them both. But this was something else. The Warlord's name was no clerical error. It was an insult, a betrayal that ran through every dollar Julia had raised with her honey-sweet smile and those wide, innocent eyes. Outside the window, the city skyline sparkled like a lie. His gut churned as he remembered the last time he saw Farouk's face, framed in the crosshairs, a sandstorm howling around them. Alex had pulled the trigger once. Now he had to pull it again, in a different way. He stood and paced the room, the floorboards creaking under his weight. His mind was already working in sniper's logic. Find the vantage point, measure the wind, take the shot. But this wasn't the desert. This was home. And Julia. Julia was no distant target. She was the woman he'd sworn to protect. A hollow laugh broke from his throat. Protect her, he muttered. From what? From me. He didn't have an answer. Just the taste of betrayal like iron on his tongue. And the realization that this was just the first crack in the crown she wore so easily. He knew what he had to do. Before we move ahead, I just want to say, your support truly means everything. We're building something special here, and our next big goal is reaching 10,000 incredible subscribers. If you're feeling the emotions in these stories, imagine what's still to come. Subscribe now, be part of this amazing journey, and let's keep growing together. Your one click can make a real difference. Let's continue the story. The gala shimmered with crystal and gold, the air perfumed with lilies and money. Julia glided across the floor in a gown the color of midnight, her laughter a melody that had charmed kings and generals alike. Donors in tuxedos leaned close, hanging on every word she said. Alex watched from the edge of the room, a soldier at a masquerade. His tailored suit couldn't hide the tension in his shoulders, the sniper's stillness in his gaze. He raised a glass of champagne, the bubbles hissing like tiny lies, and studied his wife. Julia's smile was perfect, her gestures elegant, each word a rehearsed note in her symphony of deception. She spoke of children's hospitals, of clean water and hope in distant lands. The crowd ate it up, eyes soft with wine and privilege. But Alex saw beyond the silk and sparkle. He saw the shadow in her eyes when she thought no one was watching. He saw the way she gripped her champagne flute just a little too tight. And he saw the numbers in that ledger, echoing in every clink of crystal and every hollow cheer. As the night wore on, Julia found him in the crowd. She reached for his hand with fingers that trembled only slightly. Alex, love, are you all right? You seem distant tonight. He forced a smile, the one he used to calm the young recruits before battle. I'm just watching the show, he said. His voice was calm, but his heart was a drumbeat of fury. Julia's brow furrowed. She leaned in, her perfume cloying. You know I'm doing this for the children, don't you? You believe in me, right? Alex's eyes narrowed. Of course, he said smoothly. I believe in the cause. But inside, something twisted, a cold promise. He would expose the truth. Because tonight was more than a party. It was a funeral for the illusions she'd built, and he was the only one who knew the eulogy. Back in his study, Alex sat under the muted glow of the desk lamp, the ledger spread before him like a confession. The numbers no longer blurred. They sharpened into a weapon. He ran his finger down the list of transactions, each line a line of blood. Each dollar a bullet in a war he thought he'd left behind. He'd fought Farouk's men in the dust and heat of Kandahar. Seen the hollow eyes of child soldiers and the smirk of warlords who thrived on ruin. And now, his wife's signature lay beside those names, a flourish of ink that sealed the deal. His hands curled into fists. Why, Julia, he muttered, his voice cracking. What did you sell to feel so holy? He pulled out an old photo, his unit in the dirt, arms slung around each other, grinning like fools. The memory tasted of sweat and gunpowder. He could still hear their voices, brothers who never made it home. Julia's money should have honored their sacrifice. Instead, it had paved new roads for the enemy. A soft knock at the door broke the silence. Julia stood there, bathed in the warm light of the hallway, a goddess in silk. Alex? It's late. Come to bed. He shut the ledger carefully, his face a mask. In a minute, he said. She lingered, her silhouette framed like a painting. I hate it when you're like this, she whispered. So distant. Like you're already gone. He swallowed the acid of truth. Maybe I am, he said softly. But she didn't hear, or didn't want to. When the door closed, Alex exhaled. In that quiet, he made a decision. He would not just watch. He would not just suffer. He would turn her war back on itself. Because betrayal doesn't end with a whispered apology. It ends with justice, one shot at a time. Alex's dreams that night were painted in the sepia tones of the desert. Dust swirling in the scorching wind, the crack of gunfire echoing through the mountains. He saw Farouk's face again, the warlord's grin slick with sweat and arrogance. And behind him, the ragged line of boys too young to carry rifles, their eyes hollow and their hands steady with death. He woke with a start, sweat soaking his sheets, the taste of sand still in his mouth. The room was dark, the city quiet beyond the window. But in his mind, Kandahar was alive, each memory a fresh wound. He rose and crossed the room, his hand brushing against a framed photograph on the dresser. His old unit, 7 men, dirt-streaked and grinning, their arms draped over each other's shoulders. Brothers forged in blood and fire. Charlie, Kev, Liam, he whispered their names like a prayer. Men he had trusted, men he had buried. Julia had never known those nights, the howling wind that carried the scent of gunpowder and fear. She had only seen medals and headlines, not the price etched into his soul. He reached for his phone and scrolled through the list of contacts. One name stared back at him, Sergeant Charlie Rich, the last survivor. Alex's thumb hovered for a moment, then he pressed call. A tired voice answered. Alex? You all right, brother? Alex swallowed hard. Charlie. I need you. I found something. About Julia's. Charity. A pause. Then a soft curse. Shit. You sure? Alex's voice was calm but cold. I'm sure. And I need you to watch my back. Like old times. The silence on the line felt heavy, but it was an old silence filled with trust. Finally, Charlie said, all right. Just say the word. Alex's jaw tightened. I'm not sure where this ends, Charlie, but I'm done being her pawn. As he hung up, he stared back at the photograph. Julia had played at being a savior, but Alex knew what real salvation looked like, and it wasn't written in a check or a polished speech. It was earned in blood and dirt, and he was ready to pay that price again. Morning light crept into the room, painting everything in muted gold. Julia moved through the kitchen with effortless grace, her hair tied back, a soft smile on her lips. She hummed as she poured coffee, the sound a gentle melody against the low hum of the city outside. Alex watched her from the doorway, his arms crossed over his chest. There was something surreal about her quiet domestic routine, like watching a viper sip tea in a sunlit garden. Morning, love, she said lightly, glancing over her shoulder. Her voice was warm, bright, a performance perfected over years of polite breakfasts and carefully curated affection. Morning, Alex replied, his tone neutral. She walked over, the mug cradled in her hands, and pressed a kiss to his cheek. I was thinking, she said softly, we should take a trip. Somewhere warm. Just you and me, clear our heads. He forced a small smile. That sounds nice, he said, though every word tasted like sand. Julia's eyes searched his face, lingering on the shadows under his eyes. You've been so quiet, Alex. Is it work? Or us? He took a slow breath, fighting to keep his hands steady. It's nothing, Jules. Just tired. She nodded, but there was a flicker in her gaze, something wary, a crack in the mask. "All right," she said, her tone sweet and smooth. "I'll take care of everything. You know how I am, always fixing the world's problems." Alex's jaw clenched. "Yeah," he murmured. "Always." She turned away, humming again as she sliced an apple, the knife gleaming under the kitchen lights. Alex watched the thin red line of the apple's flesh as it fell away from the blade, an echo of the lines in her ledger. Every movement she made was elegant, but it was a dance he no longer believed in. Each smile, each gentle touch, tools of a woman who wore a mask of grace over a soul he barely recognized. As he stepped out of the kitchen, his mind was already turning. He would let her plan the trip, let her play the part of the loving wife. But he was done pretending. The next time he looked into her eyes, it wouldn't be as her husband. It would be as her judge. That night, the house was silent but for the rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. Julia slept soundly, her breathing a slow, even cadence beneath the silk sheets. Alex sat alone in his study, the glow of the computer screen casting sharp shadows across his face. He moved with methodical precision, each keystroke deliberate, each click a quiet war drum in his chest. The charity's donor database sprawled before him like a battlefield map. Names he knew, men and women who thought their money was buying peace, not chaos. He scanned line after line, the transactions cold and damning. He paused on a file labeled Special Allocations. His pulse quickened as he opened it. Each entry was a bombshell. $500,000 here, $1.2 million there, all funneled to Farouk's shell companies. His gut churned with rage, but his hands were steady. He took screenshots, encrypted them, and stored them in a hidden folder labeled simply Judgment. A soft knock at the door jolted him. Julia stood there in a silk robe, her eyes soft with sleep and suspicion. "Alex, why are you up so late?" He turned the monitor off with a smooth motion, the screen going dark. "Couldn't sleep," he said, his voice calm. She stepped closer, her silhouette framed in the doorway. "You've been so distant lately. If there's something wrong, go back to bed, Jules," he said, his voice a low command. "I'll be up soon." She hesitated, her lips parting as if to argue. But then she nodded, turning back down the hall. Alex watched her go, every step a quiet performance in the moonlight. When the door clicked shut, he turned the screen back on. His eyes were cold, the sniper's focus unblinking. Each document was a bullet in his rifle. And with each line of text, he loaded his chamber. This wasn't just betrayal. This was war, fought in whispers and ledgers, in the quiet of the night. And Alex was ready to pull the trigger. Morning brought no relief. Sunlight pooled in the living room, warm and bright, but it felt like a spotlight on a stage of deceit. Julia moved with the same effortless grace, serving coffee, smiling softly, her laughter ringing clear as crystal. To any outsider, she was the perfect hostess, the loving wife. But Alex knew better. Every note in her voice was rehearsed, every smile a mask. She perched on the edge of the couch, her fingers toying with a silver bracelet. "I'm finalizing the next fundraiser," she said lightly. "We're partnering with the Cresswell Foundation. Big names, deep pockets. It'll be a huge success." Alex sat across from her, his expression calm but his mind working like a sniper's scope. "Sounds impressive," he murmured. Julia's eyes sparkled. "It's for the children, Alex. I know it's been hard for you, adjusting to civilian life. But this is bigger than us. It's salvation." He studied her, his jaw tight. "Salvation," he repeated, his voice cool. She leaned forward, her hand resting on his knee. "You trust me, don't you? I need you to believe in what we're doing." For a moment, the room was silent but for the ticking clock. Alex stared at her hand, then met her eyes. "I trust that you'll get what's coming to you," he said softly, a smile curving his lips. Julia blinked, her smile faltering. "What does that mean?" Alex leaned back in his chair, his voice calm. "It means that everything built on lies eventually crumbles." She pulled her hand back, her fingers curling in her lap. Her eyes flickered, fear? Or calculation? He couldn't tell. But he saw the crack widen in her perfect mask. She rose and moved to the window, her back to him. "You're tired, Alex," she said quietly. "Let me handle this. Let me protect us." He watched her in the morning light, the silhouette of a queen in a kingdom of shadows. "I'll handle it, Julia," he said. "Don't worry." Because he wasn't just watching anymore. He was preparing, and her kingdom was already starting to burn. The next day, Alex drove out to an old shooting range hidden in the forest's edge. The cold air bit at his skin, but the rifle in his hands felt like an extension of himself, familiar, comforting in its deadly precision. He set up his gear with the practiced ease of a soldier who'd never truly left the battlefield. Each motion was deliberate. Steady breath, steady aim. The world narrowed to the scope's cold circle. He took a deep breath and pulled the trigger. The rifle barked, the echo lost in the pines. The target, painted in bright red, shattered under his shot. A clean hole dead center, no hesitation. Alex lowered the rifle, his heartbeat steady. War was simple, even in its brutality. You aim. You fire. You take responsibility for the shot. But at home, the lines blurred. Julia's lies wove through everything, sweet smiles and whispered promises masking a rot he could no longer ignore. He remembered the first time he'd held her in his arms. Her laughter had been music, her warmth a balm for the cold places in his soul. But now he saw every touch, every soft word, as a manipulation. He could almost hear her voice in his head, rehearsing her lines like an actress. "It's for the children, Alex. You trust me, don't you?" Trust. The word felt like poison. He fired again, the bullet striking dead center. Julia had played her game well, turned herself into an angel in the eyes of the world. But he'd spent his life seeing through illusions. A sniper's eye didn't lie. As he packed up his rifle, he made a silent vow. The next time he took aim, it wouldn't be at a paper target. It would be at the empire she'd built on blood and betrayal. And when that shot landed, it wouldn't echo in the forest. It would echo in every corner of the world she thought she owned. That night, Alex sat by the fire pit in the backyard, the flames crackling softly against the night's hush. He dialed a number from memory, the phone cold and heavy in his hand. "Alex," Charlie's voice crackled through the line, low and gravelly. "You sure you want to do this?" Alex stared into the flames, the warmth doing nothing to ease the cold knot in his chest. "I'm sure," he said. "I can't let her keep playing this game. My brothers, they didn't die so she could bankroll monsters." There was a long pause on the line. Then Charlie said, "All right. I've got a few of the boys together. We're in." Alex closed his eyes, feeling that old familiar bond tighten around him like armor. "Good. I'll send you what I have. Documents, files, everything. We'll reroute every penny she's stolen back to the ones who deserve it." Charlie's tone was grim but resolute. "She'll come after you, Alex. You know that." Alex let out a slow breath. "Let her. I'm done hiding." For a moment, neither man spoke. The silence was an old friend, filled with the weight of things they couldn't say. Finally, Charlie said, "We'll watch your six. Like old times." A small smile tugged at Alex's lips. "Like old times," he echoed. As he hung up, he felt the fire's heat against his face. Julia was sleeping upstairs, oblivious to the war he was about to wage. But Alex had seen enough war to know the truth. Real battles aren't fought in deserts or jungles. They're fought in the quiet spaces, the shadows of a home built on lies. He watched the flames dance and flicker, the light reflecting in his hard, determined eyes. His brothers were with him again, not in the dirt of Kandahar, but in the quiet fury of a man who refused to let betrayal go unpunished. And this time, he would not miss his shot. The next day, Julia was in her element, dressed in a sleek white blouse that hugged her figure, a string of pearls glinting at her throat. She was on the phone, her voice light and lyrical as she spoke to one of her biggest donors. "Yes, of course, Richard," she purred. "We're finalizing the new project. The children will finally have clean water. Your name will be on the plaque, of course." Alex stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching her performance. She had always been good at this, turning sweet words into money, spinning stories of hope that played like a symphony in the ears of the rich and powerful. She ended the call with a soft laugh and turned to him. "What?" she said, her smile teasing. "Jealous of my charm?" He forced a thin smile. "You're very persuasive," he said, each word measured. She moved closer, her perfume sweet and cloying. It's not about persuasion, Alex. It's about making people believe. And isn't that what we all want? To believe in something bigger than ourselves. Alex studied her eyes, searching for even a flicker of the girl he'd fallen in love with. But there was only the polished veneer of the queen she had become. He walked past her, his hand brushing hers as he reached for the stack of glossy pamphlets on the side table. Each one was a promise: smiling children, sunlit fields, hope wrapped in a bough of charity. "Hollow," he murmured, his voice so low she almost didn't hear. "It's all so hollow, Julia." She stiffened, her smile faltering for just a heartbeat. "Don't say that," she whispered. "I'm doing good work." He looked up, his eyes hard. "Are you?" he said. "Or are you just playing God while the world burns around you?" For a moment, the mask cracked. Her lips parted, a flicker of something, fear? Anger, dancing in her eyes. But then it was gone, replaced by that same bright smile. "I'm doing what needs to be done," she said firmly. "And you should stand by me." Alex's jaw tightened. "I am," he said softly. "For now." But in his mind, he was already tearing down her kingdom brick by brick. That night, the cold glow of the computer screen was the only light in the room. Alex worked in silence, his fingers moving with mechanical precision as he dissected every transaction Julia's charity had ever made. He wore a headset, speaking in a low voice to Charlie on the other end of the line. "I'm sending you the files now," he said. "Every shell company, every fake contract. It's all here." "Jesus," Charlie muttered. "How deep does this go, Alex?" Alex paused, his eyes flickering over another line. $300,000 wired to an unmarked account in the Caymans. "Deeper than I thought," he said grimly. "Julia's turned her charity into a bank for murderers." Charlie's voice was tight with anger. "And the donors? They're just clueless." "Clueless or complicit," Alex said. "But it doesn't matter. They're going to see the truth." He leaned back, running a hand over his face. His shoulders ached, the weight of a war he hadn't chosen pressing down on him. But there was no turning back. He had already crossed the line from suspicion to action, and in that space, there was no mercy. He pulled up a photo, a child in a tattered shirt, eyes wide with hunger and fear. Julia's brochures had promised him hope. Instead, she had bought guns for the warlords who stole his future. Alex's hand trembled, just for a moment. Then he clenched it into a fist. "I'll burn her empire down," he said quietly. Charlie's voice was low but firm. "We're with you, brother. All the way." Alex disconnected the call and leaned over the keyboard. One last file, Julia's personal ledger. Her secret, her shame, his proof. He saved it, encrypted it, and named it Justice. Because that was what this was. No longer just a vendetta, no longer just anger. It was justice. And justice didn't sleep. Days blurred into nights as Alex worked, each hour another step closer to dismantling the empire Julia had built on betrayal. He barely slept, the sharp glow of the screen searing his eyes long into the darkness. He rerouted funds with the precision of a marksman, every dollar a bullet aimed at the heart of her lies. The money meant for warlords found new homes, aid groups in bombed-out villages, veterans left to rot in silence, children orphaned by the very wars Julia's money had fueled. He watched the wire transfers tick across the screen. $10,000 here, $20,000 there, each one a small spark of redemption in a world gone cold. But even as he worked, he could feel the weight of what he was doing. The lines between right and wrong, love and hate, blurred in the quiet of the night. Julia noticed the change. She watched him with those bright, wary eyes, her smile never quite reaching them. "You've been different lately," she said one evening, her voice soft, but edged like a blade. "Colder. Distant." Alex met her gaze evenly. "Maybe I finally see things for what they are." She touched his arm, her fingers warm and delicate. "I'm doing this for us, Alex. You have to believe me." He pulled away, his voice a whisper. "I don't think I ever really knew you." Julia's eyes flashed, something dark flickering behind them. "You're tired," she said briskly, smoothing her hair back. "You're seeing things that aren't there." But Alex saw everything. He saw the war she was funding with a smile. He saw the blood on her hands, masked by charity and pearls. As she turned away, he closed his eyes and let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He had become something else, no longer her loyal soldier, no longer her doting husband. He was the architect of her downfall, and he was just getting started. For days, Alex wore the mask of a devoted husband, moving through the routines of their life like an actor reciting lines from a script he no longer believed in. He woke beside Julia each morning, her head on his shoulder, her breath warm against his skin. He kissed her forehead as she smiled sleepily, murmuring sweet nothings he couldn't feel. Breakfast was a careful ballet, coffee brewing, eggs sizzling in the pan. Julia laughed at the news headlines, her voice light and carefree, while Alex's mind was miles away, tracing the paths of the money she had stolen, the lives she had shattered. She spoke of new donors, new fundraisers, her eyes alight with ambition. "The governor's wife is hosting a dinner next week," she said one morning, swirling her orange juice with a silver spoon. "It'll be good for us." "For the cause." Alex nodded, his face calm. "Of course," he murmured, his voice smooth as glass. Inside, he felt the old itch, the sniper's need to move, to act. Every smile she gave him was a bullet he swallowed. Every gentle touch a reminder of the blood she had hidden beneath her silk robes. At night, as she drifted to sleep beside him, he lay awake staring at the ceiling. In the darkness, he whispered the names of his brothers, Charlie, Kev, Liam, men who had fought and died for something real. Julia's cause was built on ashes, her empire paid for in lives she'd never known, never cared to save. He played his part well, never slipping. Each day he kissed her cheek, held her hand, whispered promises. But behind his calm eyes was the sniper's gaze, focused, patient, lethal. The world saw Julia as a beacon of hope. But Alex saw the truth. He saw the cracks widening in her golden mask, and he knew that soon, very soon, it would all come crashing down. The night of the dinner, Julia was a vision of elegance, her dress a deep emerald green that caught the light like liquid jade, her hair pinned back with diamond clips that sparkled like stars. She moved through the crowded ballroom with practiced ease, laughter and charm in every step. Alex followed half a pace behind, the perfect husband in his tailored black suit. He watched the way she leaned in to whisper to the governor's wife, her hand resting lightly on a senator's arm. The room was a blur of gold and crystal, of clinking glasses and murmured deals, but Alex saw only her, a queen in her castle of illusions. She turned to him, her smile bright. "Alex, love, this is Senator Hale. He's promised to match every dollar we raise tonight." Alex shook the man's hand, his own grip firm, his smile polite. "I'm sure every dollar will do good work," he said smoothly, though the words tasted bitter. The senator chuckled, oblivious. "Your wife is a wonder, Alex. Truly an inspiration." Alex's jaw tightened. "She is," he said softly, though his eyes never wavered. As the night wore on, Julia's laughter grew louder, the lights brighter. But Alex saw the flicker of calculation in her eyes, the tightness in her smile when she thought no one was watching. She was working the room like a battlefield, each handshake a skirmish, each laugh a carefully aimed shot. In a quiet moment, she pulled him aside, her fingers brushing his lapel. "You're quiet tonight," she murmured. "Smile, Alex. People are watching." He looked down at her, his voice low and even. "I'm smiling, Julia, but I'm not blind." For just a moment, her facade slipped, her eyes narrowing, her lips parting in surprise. But then the smile returned, bright and perfect. "You're tired," she said, her hand slipping into his. "Let me handle everything tonight." He let her lead him back into the swirl of the party, his mind already turning. She thought she could dazzle him into silence, blind him with glamour and gold. But Alex had seen the truth beneath the diamonds, and he would not be dazzled. After the dinner, the house was dark and still. Julia had retreated to her dressing room, her laughter replaced by quiet exhaustion. Alex sat alone in the study, the fire casting long shadows that flickered across the walls. He pulled up the encrypted files on his laptop, each one a shard of the truth she tried so hard to bury. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, his breath steady, his heart a slow, deliberate drumbeat in his chest. A soft knock startled him. He shut the laptop with a quiet click as Julia stepped in, her silk robe catching the firelight. Her hair was loose, tumbling down her back in soft waves, her face scrubbed clean of makeup but still radiant. "Can't sleep?" she asked, her voice gentle. Alex leaned back in his chair, his eyes calm but unyielding. "Just thinking," he said. She crossed the room, her bare feet silent on the old wooden floors. "You've been so distant lately," she murmured. "I don't like it when you shut me out." He said nothing, his gaze steady. She knelt beside him, her hand on his knee, her eyes pleading. "Talk to me, Alex. I'm still your wife." He studied her, his voice low. "Are you?" he asked softly. She blinked, her mouth opening in surprise. "Of course I am," she said, her tone trembling. "I love you." Alex reached out, his fingers brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. "Love doesn't buy bullets, Julia," he whispered. "It doesn't sign deals with men who slaughter children." Her eyes widened, fear flashing for just an instant before she hid it behind a soft, brittle smile. "You're tired," she said again. "You're seeing shadows where there are none." He leaned in, his voice a quiet promise. "No, Julia. I'm seeing everything now." For a moment, the silence between them was thick as smoke. Then she rose, her face calm, but her hands trembling. "Come to bed, Alex," she said, her voice steady. "Let me remind you why we fight." But as she turned away, he knew there was no going back. The whispers in the dark had become a roar, and he was done pretending not to hear. The next morning, Alex sat on the back porch as the first rays of dawn split the sky, his phone pressed to his ear. Charlie's voice crackled on the other end, gravelly but alive with purpose. "We've got eyes on the shell accounts," Charlie said. "Money's moving fast, but we're faster. You've got the green light." Alex's gaze was fixed on the horizon, the faint glow of sunrise painting the sky with streaks of fire. "I'm ready," he said. "No more waiting." Charlie paused, his voice dropping to a low rasp. "You know this could end messy, Alex. She's got friends in high places." Alex's lips tightened into a grim smile. "She also has ghosts. And I know how to speak to them." He could almost hear Charlie's nod through the line. "All right. The boys and I are in. We'll handle the movement, get the supplies to the men who need them. You handle her." Alex closed his eyes for a moment, breathing in the cold air, the scent of pine and frost grounding him. "She doesn't know what's coming," he murmured, "and she won't see it until it's too late." He ended the call and sat there in the quiet, the weight of the war he was about to unleash pressing on his shoulders. But he felt no fear, only a cold certainty that this was the only way. Inside, he could hear Julia moving around the kitchen, her voice light as she spoke on another call, another promise, another lie. He let her voice drift through the glass like a distant echo, already fading in his mind. He thought of his brothers, Charlie, Kev, Liam, the men who had fought beside him, who had died in the dust and the heat. He thought of the children in Julia's brochures, their faces hollow with hunger and fear. And he thought of justice, not the kind you read about in headlines, but the kind you carve out with your own hands. He stood, his body strong and steady, the sunrise glinting off the steel of his resolve. The Phantom Squad was ready. And this time, they would not fight for a country or a flag. They would fight for truth, and they would not lose. The night before the charity gala, Julia was a whirlwind of last-minute plans and practice smiles. The mansion buzzed with energy, caterers in white jackets, florists weaving delicate arches of lilies and orchids, the soft hum of classical music floating through the air. Alex moved through it all like a shadow. He watched Julia greet the caterers, her voice warm and bright, her laughter ringing out like crystal chimes. She was the perfect hostess, her mask flawless. But he saw the tension in her shoulders, the way her smile slipped when she thought no one was looking. He saw the flicker of something else, fear, maybe, or suspicion. That night, as the final details fell into place, Julia found him in the garden. Moonlight silvered the stone path, the flowers glistening with dew. She wore a simple silk robe, her hair loose, her face almost too perfect in the pale light. "Alex," she said softly, stepping closer, "this is the biggest night of my life. I need you by my side." He studied her face, the curve of her lips, the softness in her eyes that had once been a sanctuary. But now it all felt like a performance, An elaborate dance with no music. "I'll be there," he said, his voice calm. "But don't mistake my silence for blindness, Julia." Her eyes narrowed, her breath catching just slightly. "What are you saying?" He took a step closer, his voice low and measured. "I'm saying that I see you. All of you. And I'm done pretending I don't." She swallowed, her hands twisting in the silk belt of her robe. "You're scaring me, Alex." He smiled faintly. "Good," he said. "Fear is the beginning of truth." For a moment, they stood there in the moonlight, husband and wife, predator and prey, the last breath of a marriage built on lies. Then she turned away, her steps quick and light, her silhouette vanishing into the shadows. Alex watched her go, his heart steady, his mind clear. Tomorrow, the dance would end, and the truth would bring the whole illusion crashing down. That night, sleep was a stranger to Alex. He sat alone in the darkness of his study, the faint glow of the computer screen casting his face in sharp lines. He opened a folder labeled Brothers, photos of his unit in Kandahar, dusty and laughing, their eyes bright despite the dirt and the blood. They were more than soldiers. They were family, men who had trusted him to watch their backs, who had fought beside him in the endless heat. He clicked through each image slowly, the memories washing over him like a tide. He could still hear the gunfire, the distant howl of the desert wind. He could still smell the sweat and the gunpowder, the sharp tang of fear and determination. He closed his eyes and let the memories settle, a sniper's prayer whispered into the silence. "Liam, Charlie, Kev, I'm still here," he murmured. "I'm still fighting." He opened Julia's ledger next, the lines of numbers sharp and clear in the dark. Each transaction was a bullet she'd fired, a life she'd stolen. And each one was a promise Alex had made to himself, to see it through to the end. A soft knock at the door. Julia again, her voice low, almost hesitant. "Alex? Come to bed." He didn't turn around. "I'll be there soon," he said. She lingered a moment longer, then her footsteps retreated down the hall. He let out a slow breath, his fingers tightening around the edge of the desk. He thought of the children in the photos she used to sell her cause, their hollow eyes, their broken smiles. He thought of the men he'd lost, the men she betrayed with every lie she told. And in that quiet room, he made a silent vow tomorrow her empire would fall. Tomorrow, every lie would be dragged into the light. He was done with illusions, done with whispers. Tomorrow, he would be the sniper again, calm, precise, and unflinching. And when he took his shot, it would be the last. The morning of the gala arrived like the calm before a storm. Alex sat at the kitchen table, the scent of fresh coffee in the air. Sunlight streamed through the windows, painting Julia's face in gold as she busied herself with last-minute calls. He watched her, his expression unreadable. She looked radiant in the early light, her smile practiced and poised. But he saw the tension in her shoulders, the restless flick of her fingers across the screen of her phone. She was playing the role of the benevolent queen, but her crown was slipping. Julia ended a call and turned to him, her eyes bright. "Everything's set," she said. "Tonight will be perfect." Alex took a sip of coffee, his gaze steady. "I'm sure it will be," he said softly. She hesitated, searching his face. "You're still with me, aren't you, Alex?" He met her eyes, his voice calm and clear. "I gave you my word, Julia. I'll be by your side until the end." She exhaled, relief softening her features. She moved closer, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder. "I knew I could count on you," she whispered. "We're stronger together, you and I." Alex reached up, his fingers brushing hers. "Together," he echoed, though in his mind, the word had already lost its meaning. Later that afternoon, as she rehearsed her speech in the garden, he stood at the window, watching her through the glass. She was speaking to an empty lawn, her hands gesturing, her voice strong and passionate. He remembered the vows they'd made on their wedding day, promises of love and loyalty, of standing together no matter the cost. But those promises had been forged in ignorance, before he'd seen the truth of the woman he had married. Now, he knew what he had to do. He had sworn an oath to her once. Today, he would break it, for the sake of the lives she had betrayed, for the brothers she had dishonored. As Julia practiced her final words, Alex turned away from the window, his heart steady. Tonight, the world would see her as she truly was. And when the truth came crashing down, he would not look away. The afternoon sun dipped low, and Alex found himself in the garage, his old gear laid out before him. A battered duffel bag, a worn leather journal, a patch bearing the insignia of his old unit. The air was heavy with the scent of oil and dust, a scent that carried him back to nights spent under a black sky, the crack of rifle fire in his ears. He reached for the journal, its pages yellowed and dog-eared. Inside were notes and memories, scraps of conversations with his brothers, plans scribbled in the heat of battle. He flipped to a page where Charlie had once written, in thick, scrawled letters, "No man left behind." Alex traced the words with his thumb, his jaw tightening. No man left behind. But Julia had left them all behind. Every promise of hope twisted into profit, every prayer for peace drowned in blood money. He could almost hear them. Charlie's easy laughter, Liam's quiet determination, Kev's steady calm. The music of war, brutal and beautiful in its raw honesty. They had never asked for medals or headlines. They had fought because someone had to. And now, Alex fought because he owed them that much. Because the battle didn't end when the last shot was fired. It only ended when the truth was known. He zipped up the duffel and slung it over his shoulder. In the quiet of the garage, he closed his eyes and let the memories settle like dust around him. He would carry them into the night, the weight of every life lost, every lie exposed. Julia might have built her empire on the backs of men like him, but she would not bury their voices. Not while he still had breath in his body. He stepped out into the fading light, the sun a molten blaze on the horizon. And in that moment, he made a promise to his brothers, to the world, and to himself. Tonight, the song of war would be sung once more. The ballroom glittered like a cathedral of glass and gold. Chandeliers sparkled overhead, their light casting long, elegant shadows across the polished floor. Guests moved in swirling colors, silks and satins, jewels catching the light with every turn. Julia stood at the center of it all, a vision of poise in a dress of shimmering ivory. Her hair swept up in a flawless chignon, her smile practiced to perfection. She moved with the grace of a queen holding court, each laugh, and not another step in the dance she had choreographed so carefully. Alex stood at her side, a quiet sentinel in black. His eyes missed nothing, the flicker of a nervous donor's gaze, the quick, whispered exchanges between men in dark suits. The money flowed through the room like wine. Every glass raised a silent pact, every handshake an unspoken bargain. Julia leaned in close to him, her breath warm against his ear. "Smile, Alex," she murmured, her tone light. "Tonight is everything we've worked for." He turned his head slightly, his lips brushing her temple. "I'm smiling," he said softly, though the truth in his eyes was cold and hard. The crowd moved around them, music swelling as the string quartet played a soft, haunting melody. Julia raised her glass, her voice ringing clear and bright. "To hope," she declared, her smile dazzling. "To a better world." The applause was soft at first, then swelling, polite, admiring, empty. Alex felt the weight of every clap, every hollow cheer. They were applauding a mask, not a woman. And he knew that soon, the mask would fall. He watched her as she worked the room, her laughter bright, her eyes always calculating. She had built this world on illusions, polished speeches, shining gowns, carefully curated smiles. But he was done playing her perfect husband. Tonight, he was the sniper again, patient, precise, waiting for the perfect shot. And when he took it, there would be no applause. Only the truth, ringing out like a gunshot in the silence. The ballroom hummed with laughter and the clink of crystal glasses, but Alex's mind was a storm. He stood at Julia's side, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back, the perfect husband's smile etched across his lips. But inside, he was coiled tight, every breath a measured beat in the countdown to truth. Julia leaned closer, her perfume sweet, her voice a silken thread in the noise. "They love us tonight," she whispered, her eyes bright with triumph. "Do you feel it, Alex? The power in this room?" He forced a smile, his gaze locked on her face. "I feel it," he murmured. But what he felt was something else, a cold, righteous fury that thrummed beneath his skin. They moved through the crowd together, a pair of royalty on display. Julia laughed, her hand brushing his chest, her words soft and careful. To the world, she was the patron saint of charity, each donor enchanted by her smile, each handshake another seal on her empire. But Alex saw the cracks. He saw the way her fingers tightened around her glass when a question lingered too long, the slight catch in her voice when a donor asked for details she didn't want to share. As the night deepened, Julia excused herself for a moment, slipping away into the quiet of the corridor beyond the ballroom. Alex watched her go, his heart steady. He followed, his steps silent on the marble floor. He found her leaning against the wall, her head bowed, her breath ragged. When she looked up, their eyes locked. No masks, no laughter, just raw truth. "Alex," she whispered, her voice trembling. "What are you doing?" He stepped closer, his voice low and calm. "What you should have done from the start, Julia. I'm ending this." She shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "You don't understand. I understand everything," he said, his voice a quiet promise. "And tonight, so will everyone else." For a moment, she was silent, her face pale in the soft light. Then she turned away, her shoulders trembling. Alex watched her go, the weight of the night settling over him like the heavy barrel of a rifle. The enemy was no longer in some far-off land. She was here, in his bed, in his heart. And tonight, he would not miss his mark. The soft music of the ballroom faded as Alex made his way back into the crowd, his mind focused and unflinching. He spotted a familiar face, a donor's assistant, a young man with wary eyes and a nervous energy that belied the elegant cut of his suit. "Matthew," Alex said, his voice low but firm. "A word." Matthew flinched at the sound of his name, glancing around before leaning closer. "Mr. Cooper." I don't know what you're talking about." Alex's smile was calm, his tone gentle. "You do. You've seen the ledgers. You know where the money's going." Matthew swallowed hard, his eyes darting to the door where Julia had vanished. "I can't. She'll destroy me." Alex leaned in, his breath warm against Matthew's ear. "She's already destroyed enough," he said softly. "You have a choice tonight, stay silent, or help me end this." The young man's hands trembled, his voice a shaky whisper. "I have the files, emails, wire transfers. Everything." "Then give them to me," Alex said. "It's time the world saw the truth." Matthew hesitated, then reached into his jacket, pressing a small flash drive into Alex's palm. "Be careful," he whispered. "She's not what she seems." Alex closed his hand around the drive, his eyes hard. "Neither am I," he said, turning away. As he walked back through the crowd, the flash drive was a silent promise in his hand, a bullet in the chamber, waiting to be fired. Julia reappeared moments later, her smile bright and brittle. "Everything all right?" she asked, her voice as smooth as silk. "Perfect," Alex said, his smile calm. "Just perfect." But inside, the truth was a storm, raging, relentless, ready to sweep her empire away. The gala stretched into the night, laughter and music weaving through the air like a spell. Julia took the stage, her voice ringing clear and bright as she spoke of hope and healing, of a world remade by kindness and charity. Alex stood in the shadows, the flash drive burning in his pocket like a brand. He watched her every move, the way she gestured, the cadence of her words, the perfect timing of each smile. To the world, she was flawless. But to Alex, she was a puppet master, her strings spun from lies and blood money, each thread a noose around the neck of innocence. When she finished, the applause was thunderous, the crowd rising to their feet in a swell of admiration. Julia bowed her head, her cheeks flushed with triumph. She stepped down from the stage, her eyes finding Alex in the crowd. She moved toward him, her smile soft, her hand slipping into his. "You see," she said, her voice low and sweet. "Together, we're unstoppable." Alex met her gaze, his own eyes calm and clear. "Yes," he murmured. "Together." But in his mind, the word had already changed. Together, until tonight. Together, until the lies fell away. The music swelled again, and they moved through the crowd as if nothing had changed. But every step was a countdown, every breath a quiet promise that the final pretense was almost over. He felt the weight of the drive in his pocket, the weight of every life she had betrayed. And he knew that tonight, the truth would not be silenced. He would stand by her side until the end. And when that end came, it would not be a whisper, it would be a reckoning. The night deepened, the air outside crisp and cool, but inside the mansion, the temperature seemed to climb with every false smile and hollow toast. Alex felt it all, the heat of the lights, the heavy scent of perfume and power, the low murmur of conversations that never touched the truth. Julia moved through it all like a queen, her laughter bright, her eyes glittering with a pride that only grew as the night wore on. But Alex saw the edges of her world begin to fray, small things, a donor's frown, a whisper that lingered too long, the flicker of doubt in eyes that had once been dazzled. He slipped away into a quiet alcove near the back of the room, the music muffled by heavy velvet curtains. There, in the half-light, he pulled the flash drive from his pocket, turning it over in his fingers like a talisman. His thumb hovered over the small silver casing, and he closed his eyes, drawing a slow breath. This was it. Everything he had worked for, every moment of doubt and rage distilled into a single choice. A voice startled him, soft, hesitant. "Alex." He turned, and Julia stood there, her silhouette framed by the doorway, her eyes wide and uncertain. "What are you doing back here?" she asked, her tone light but with a thread of tension that betrayed her. He met her gaze calmly, his voice measured. "I was just thinking," he said. "About everything." She stepped closer, her fingers brushing his arm. "This is our night, Alex. We should be celebrating." He studied her, seeing the cracks in her mask, tiny fissures that grew with every lie she told. "Are we celebrating? Or hiding?" he asked softly. Her lips parted, but no words came. For a moment, the silence was heavy, thick with all the things neither of them would say. Alex slipped the flash drive back into his pocket, his decision made. He would not confront her here, not yet. But soon, very soon. And when he did, there would be no more illusions, only the truth, rising from the ashes of everything she had built. The following day, Alex found himself driving through the back roads of the city, the sun low on the horizon, the sky a canvas of fading gold. He parked at a small, run-down cafe on the outskirts of town, far from the polished ballrooms and the gilded lies of Julia's world. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of stale coffee and old cigarette smoke. Charlie sat in a corner booth, his broad shoulders hunched, his eyes hard and watchful. He looked up as Alex approached, a faint smile cutting through his grim expression. "You sure about this?" Charlie asked as Alex slid into the booth. Alex nodded. "It's time," he said. "We're not just cleaning up her mess. We're making sure she can't ever build another empire on the backs of people she'll never understand." Charlie took a slow sip of coffee, his gaze steady. "You've always been the one with the steady aim," he said quietly. "Just make sure you're aiming at the right target." Alex's jaw tightened. "I know exactly where to aim." Charlie reached into his jacket, pulling out a small envelope. "Farouk," he said simply. "He was in town last week. I tailed him myself. He's still tied to Julia's accounts. She's been moving money through him for months." Alex felt his pulse quicken, anger simmering beneath the surface. "She lied about everything," he murmured. "Everything." Charlie leaned forward, his voice low and serious. "You ready to end this?" Alex met his friend's eyes, the memories of war flickering behind his gaze. "I've never been more ready." They sat in silence for a moment, two men bound by shared ghosts and a cause that had never really ended. Finally, Alex stood, his movements deliberate and calm. "Tonight," he said softly. "It ends tonight." Charlie's nod was slow, but there was pride in his eyes. "Give him hell, brother." Alex walked out of the cafe, the cold evening air biting at his skin. The last pieces were falling into place, and he felt the weight of the final shot settling in his bones. He was done waiting, done doubting. Tonight, the wolf would confess. The final hour arrived like a storm. Julia moved through their bedroom, her silk gown flowing around her like water, her bare shoulders glowing in the low light. She stood at the mirror, her reflection flawless, every hair in place, every line of her dress perfect. Alex watched her from the doorway, his expression unreadable. She caught his gaze in the mirror and turned, her smile soft, her eyes wide and searching. "Are you ready?" she asked, her voice gentle, almost shy. "Tonight, Everything will change. He stepped into the room, his steps measured, his breath calm. Yes, he said softly. It will. She crossed the room, her fingers tracing the lapel of his jacket, her touch light and intimate. You've always been my strength, Alex, she murmured. We're unstoppable together. His hands closed over hers, his grip firm but tender. I believed that once, he said quietly. But you didn't build this with me, Julia. You built it on lies. Her lips parted, her voice catching. Alex, no, he said firmly, his voice steady as steel. No more lies. No more pretending. She pulled her hands away, her eyes hardening, her breath quickening. You think you know everything, she said, her tone low and urgent. But you don't understand. You can't. He stepped back, his voice calm. I understand enough. For a moment, they stood in silence, the soft music from the gala below drifting through the floorboards like a ghost. Julia's eyes shone in the low light, her face pale and beautiful, her mask slipping at last. You'll ruin everything, she whispered, her voice trembling. Everything we've built. Alex's jaw tightened, his eyes unflinching. It was never built on truth. It was built on blood and stolen lives. And tonight, it ends. She stood frozen, her breath ragged, her shoulders trembling beneath the silk. And for the first time, Alex saw the fear that lay beneath the perfect smile, the cracks in the queen's crown. He turned away, his steps measured and sure. The time for illusions was over. Tonight, the final shot would be his, and it would be the truth. The gala was at its peak, the ballroom shimmering with candlelight and murmured promises. Julia moved through the crowd with practiced ease, her smile bright, her laughter soft. She paused at each table, her hand brushing shoulders, her voice a song of hope and redemption. Alex watched it all, his expression calm but his mind sharp. He knew the weight of every dollar pledged tonight, the quiet deals signed in the darkness, the silent complicity of those who toasted to her false cause. He slipped away from the main floor, moving down a quiet hallway to the small, private office Julia used as her command center during these events. He stepped inside and closed the door, his breath steady as he locked it behind him. The room was warm, lined with shelves of leather-bound books and framed photographs of Julia with smiling children. A large mahogany desk dominated the center of the room, a laptop glowing softly in the dim light. Alex sat at the desk and pulled the flash drive from his pocket. His fingers moved with quiet determination as he plugged it in, the screen flickering to life with a flood of data, emails, bank statements, secret transfers. Each line was a weapon, each file a testament to the empire she had built on the backs of the forgotten. He selected the folder labeled Special Allocations and opened it. The name stared back at him, Farouk. Zahid. Men whose hands were stained with the blood of innocents, paid with money meant for children's futures. He felt his pulse quicken, but his hands were steady as he copied everything onto the computer. Each file, each damning record, he wouldn't let them vanish into the shadows. He leaned back for a moment, his breath slow, his jaw tight. He thought of the children in those photographs, faces bright with promise, never knowing the truth behind the camera's lens. And he thought of his brothers in arms, men who had given everything only to be betrayed by the woman he had once called his own. A knock at the door. Julia's voice, light but with an edge of steel. Alex? Are you in there? He closed the folder and stood, his heart steady. Just a minute, he called out. Tonight, the donor's den would become a place of reckoning. And when he opened that door, the truth would be ready to rise. Julia stood in the doorway, her silhouette framed by the glow of the chandelier behind her. She wore a dress of midnight blue, its fabric shimmering like water, her eyes searching his face for any hint of betrayal. Is everything all right? She asked softly, her voice sweet but cautious. You've been distant tonight. Alex met her gaze, his expression calm, almost tender. Everything's fine, he said, his voice even. I was just taking a moment to think. She stepped into the room, her perfume drifting around her like a cloud of roses and secrets. It's a big night for us, she said, her fingers brushing the lapel of his jacket. We've worked so hard to build this, to make a difference. He felt the weight of her touch, the warmth of her hand. But beneath it, he saw the darkness, saw the children she had betrayed, the family she had sacrificed for her ambitions. "I know," he said quietly. "It's all coming together, tonight." She smiled, her eyes softening, her lips parting in a breath of relief. "I'm glad you see it, Alex. I'm glad you're still with me." He reached up, cupping her cheek with a gentleness that belied the war raging inside him. "Always," he said, his voice a whisper of truth and lie woven together. She leaned into his touch, her eyes closing for a moment as if to savor the comfort she believed was still there. "Come," she said, pulling back and taking his hand. "The final speech is about to begin." He let her lead him down the corridor, the music swelling as they approached the ballroom. The crowd waited, their faces bright with anticipation, the air electric with expectation. As they stepped into the light, Julia raised her glass in silent salute, her smile radiant. But Alex saw the truth behind her eyes, saw the fear that lurked in the shadows of her triumph. And in that moment, he knew that the final invitation had been sent. The night was hers, but the reckoning would be his. The ballroom was a palace of illusions, every crystal chandelier and gilded mirror a testament to Julia's carefully crafted image. The crowd gathered close, their faces flushed with wine and wonder, their applause echoing through the room like a heartbeat of blind devotion. Julia stepped forward, her voice a melody of hope. "Tonight," she said, her words smooth as silk, "we stand together for those who cannot stand for themselves. We open our hearts to the world's pain, and in doing so, we heal it." The room erupted in applause, the sound washing over her like a tide. She raised her hand, her smile soft, her eyes glistening with false tears. Alex stood at her side, his expression calm, his hands folded neatly in front of him. But inside, his mind was a storm, each word she spoke another wound, each lie another shot fired at the truth. As she finished, she turned to him, her eyes bright. "Alex," she said softly, "will you say a few words?" He hesitated for a breath, then stepped forward. The room fell silent, every eye on him. He felt the weight of their gaze, the hush of expectation. He took a slow breath, his voice steady. "We're here tonight because we believe in something bigger than ourselves," he said, his tone calm but resonant. "We believe in justice. In truth." Julia's smile flickered, her fingers tightening around her glass. Alex's eyes swept the room, each face a mask of polite interest. "But what is justice," he said softly, "if it's built on lies? What is hope, if it's paid for in blood?" A ripple of unease moved through the crowd, a soft murmur of confusion. Julia's smile froze, her eyes narrowing. He met her gaze, his voice quiet but unyielding. "Tonight, the masks come off," he said, "and the truth stands alone." The room fell silent. And in that silence, Alex felt the weight of everything he had fought for, everything he had lost. This was the moment he had been waiting for. The masquerade of lies was ending, and he was ready for the truth to rise. The moment hung in the air like the hush before a storm. Julia's eyes glimmered with something sharp, fear or fury, he couldn't tell. The room was still, the polite applause fading into uneasy silence. Alex's breath was calm, his voice even. "For years," he said, his gaze sweeping the room, "this cause has been built on your faith, your money, your belief in Julia's vision." He paused, the weight of every eye on him. "But tonight, I won't let your trust be another casualty." Julia stepped forward, her smile fixed and brittle. "Alex," she said, her tone low, a tremor in her voice. "This isn't the time, it's exactly the time," he cut in, his voice rising just enough to carry through the room. "I've seen the truth in those ledgers, Julia. The payments, the warlords, the blood on every dollar you raised." A gasp rippled through the crowd. Faces turned, whispers crackled in the air. Julia's eyes flashed, her hand gripping the edge of the podium. "Lies," she said, her voice taut. "He's confused, he's been unwell." Alex let out a slow breath, steadying himself. "You called it charity," he said quietly, "but I call it betrayal." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the flash drive. The tiny silver rectangle caught the light, a bullet of truth. "I have every transaction," he said. "Every promise turned to poison. And tonight, you'll see it all." Julia's facade cracked, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. "Alex," he held her gaze, his voice calm but unyielding. "The truth doesn't care about your speeches, Julia. It doesn't care about your donors or your name. It only cares about what you've done. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Then he turned to the projection screen behind them, the click of the flash drive sliding home echoing through the room like a gunshot. The images flared to life, and the masquerade was over. The screen lit up with damning evidence, each transaction another blow, each image another truth Julia had tried so hard to bury. The room fell into a heavy silence, the music of the gala gone, replaced by the cold rhythm of numbers and names. Julia's face drained of color. Her breath came in ragged gasps, her fingers white-knuckled on the podium. "Alex, please," she said, her voice a desperate whisper. "This isn't the place." He turned to her, his voice low but unwavering. "There's no other place, Julia. You made this room your kingdom. Let it be your reckoning too." The guests watched, their polite smiles vanished, replaced by shock and disbelief. A senator stepped back, his face pale. A woman covered her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. Alex stepped closer to Julia, his words soft but edged in steel. "You lied to them. To me. You took their faith and sold it to the highest bidder." She shook her head, tears welling. "I did it for us," she said, her voice cracking. "For the children." "No," he said, his jaw tight. "You did it for yourself." For a moment, silence swallowed them whole. Julia's shoulders slumped, her perfect posture slipping away. She looked so small, so lost, no longer the queen of illusions, but just a woman standing alone in the ruin of her own making. Alex felt the weight of it all, every moment of love they'd shared, every promise she'd broken. He had loved her once, with a devotion that had blinded him. But love built on lies was just another kind of cage. He turned to the crowd, his voice calm. "This is the truth. And tonight, it speaks louder than any vow ever could." The images on the screen played on, each one a testament to the empire she had built and the marriage she had destroyed. The weight of the truth pressed down on the room like a storm cloud ready to break. Julia's eyes darted from face to face, her lips trembling as she tried to pull together the shreds of her composure. A man near the front stepped forward, his voice low and shaking. "Julia, is this real?" She opened her mouth, but no words came. Her throat worked, her breath ragged, but the lies had run dry. The silence was brutal, each second another blade turned against her. The images kept playing, children's aid money diverted to arms dealers, private jets bought with stolen hope, Warlords' grin stamped in every dollar. Julia's hands fell to her sides, her shoulders bowed. She looked at Alex, her eyes brimming with something close to panic. "You don't understand," she whispered. "I did what I had to. You would have done the same." He met her gaze, his voice quiet but firm. "No, Julia. I fought to protect them. You fought to protect yourself." She let out a soft, broken sob. I never wanted this." Alex shook his head slowly. "But you chose it." In that moment, the last of the illusions fell away. Julia turned from him, her body trembling, her perfect mask shattered beyond repair. The room watched as the queen of their masquerade fell silent, her empire of lies collapsing around her. A reporter in the crowd raised a camera, the flash bursting in a cold white glare. Julia flinched as the light caught her tears, immortalizing her downfall in a single, silent frame. Alex stood still, his breath steady. He felt no triumph in her ruin, only the final quiet of a truth that could no longer be denied. The queen had fallen, and there was no throne left for her to reclaim. In the days that followed, the fallout spread like wildfire. Headlines screamed her name, Julia Cooper, the socialite turned war profiteer. Investigations launched overnight, the weight of the evidence undeniable. Her donors vanished, their money pulled back like a tide, leaving her stranded and alone. Alex watched it all unfold with a quiet calm. He sat on the porch in the early dawn, the cool air sharp in his lungs. The world felt different. No more whispers in the dark, no more silk-clad illusions. Just the steady rhythm of breath and the truth that had finally seen the light. Charlie called him that morning, his voice rough with sleep. "It's done," he said. "She's finished." Alex nodded, his eyes on the horizon. She was finished the moment she chose the wrong side. Charlie was quiet for a moment. "You all right, brother?" Alex let out a slow breath. "I'm clearer." For the first time in a long time. The door behind him creaked open, and Julia stepped out, her face pale, her eyes hollow. She wore no makeup, no pearls, just the raw edges of a woman undone. "Alex," she said softly, her voice hoarse. I didn't know it would end like this." He looked at her, his expression calm, unflinching. "It always ends like this, Julia. Lies can only carry you so far." Tears welled in her eyes, but he felt nothing for them now, no anger, no pity. Just the cold, quiet certainty of a man who had done what needed to be done. She turned away, her shoulders hunched, her footsteps soft on the wooden boards. Alex watched her go, the final thread between them cut clean. The price of justice had been steep, trust broken, love turned to ash. But as the sun rose over the horizon, he knew it was worth it. Some truths were worth every cost. The days after Julia's fall unfolded in hushed tones, like a city catching its breath after a storm. The mansion that had once been the stage for her charade now sat silent, its halls echoing with memories of laughter that had never been real. Alex walked those halls alone, his footsteps soft on the marble floors. He paused in the library, his fingers brushing over the rows of books she had once used as props, words she'd never cared to read, stories she'd never believed in. He pulled one down at random, flipping through pages that smelled of dust and time. The quiet was comforting. The weight of truth finally settled into every corner of the grand house. Outside, the wind rustled through the gardens, carrying with it the scent of early spring. Flowers that had been forced to bloom for her galas now grew wild and unpruned, their petals bright in the soft dawn light. Alex stepped out onto the back porch, the morning sun warm on his skin. Charlie was there, leaning against the railing, his broad frame relaxed for the first time in years. "You look different," Charlie said with a quiet smile. Alex let out a small, rueful laugh. "Feels different," he said. Like the weight is finally gone." Charlie nodded, his gaze on the horizon. "The war's over, brother. At least this one." Alex looked back at the house, the gilded cage, the stage of illusions, and let out a long breath. "She built it on sand, Charlie. It was always going to fall." Charlie clapped a hand on his shoulder. "And you made sure it did." For a moment, they stood there in the quiet, the only sound the soft rush of wind through the trees. The sun rose higher, casting the world in gold. Alex felt it settle in his bones, the calm after the storm, the promise of a quiet rebirth. The house would stand, but it would be his now. His to fill with real laughter, real memories. The ghosts of Julia's lies would fade like the echoes of a distant war. And for the first time in years, he allowed himself to believe in tomorrow. Weeks later, Alex found himself standing in the doorway of his study, the room where it had all begun. The desk was clean now, the ledgers gone, replaced by the quiet hum of a new life. He turned when he heard footsteps. Julia stood there, framed in the soft light of dusk. Her hair was loose, her face pale and bare. She didn't speak, just looked at him with eyes that seemed to hold the weight of 1,000 silent apologies. "You're leaving," he said, his voice calm. She nodded. "There's nothing left for me here." Alex studied her for a long moment, then gave a small nod. "You're right," he said. "There's nothing left for either of us, except the truth." She swallowed, her lips trembling. "I never meant for any of it to end like this." "Maybe not," Alex said softly. "But it did." She hesitated, then turned away, her steps quiet as she disappeared down the hall. He watched her go, feeling no regret, just a quiet finality. The last thread cut. He stepped out onto the porch again, the sky streaked with the colors of a dying sun. He felt the wind on his face, clean and cold, and closed his eyes for a moment. He thought of his brothers, of the children who would never know how close they had come to being lost. And he thought of himself, the man he had been, the man he had become. He opened his eyes and whispered into the fading light, "Was it worth it?" Then he turned, his gaze steady, his heart calm. And to you, the ones who have watched this story unfold, let me ask, would you have done the same? Tell me in the comments below, where are you watching from tonight? Let me know your thoughts. And if this story gripped you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share so more can join us in this world of betrayal, justice, and truth. Because every story deserves to be told, and every truth deserves to be heard.